this, you might argue that Shiloh came with Mashiach. If that's the case, then Joseph Arimathea, not of Arimathea, Joseph Arimathea, which means Joseph in the direct line of the divine kings. That's what Arimathea means, in the direct line of divine kings. So his name itself tells you that he was the Joseph that is described in Matthew 1. Not Joseph, the husband of Mary. If you have a Bible that says Joseph, the husband of Mary in chapter 1, your Bible has a fatal flaw.
Right.
It's fatal.
Right.
The blind men crying out to Mashiach, son of David, heal us. How could they call him son of David if you can't attach Mashiach to David? Right. You can't attach him to his supposed father Joseph that's described in Luke 3. It has to be through Miriam, and Miriam has to be direct descendant, not the husband, the father of Miriam. So if your Bible says the husband of Miriam in Matthew 1, you have a Bible that has a fatal flaw. It's fatal. He cannot be the Ben David at this point, which means that those blind men were lying, which means Peter was lying in Acts 2, etc. And which also means that the Bible is errant because Matthew 1 contradicts Luke 3.
Right.
That's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah. But when you understand that Joseph Arimathea was in the direct line of kings, Miriam was a princess in the direct line of David.
Yeah.
And so when Pilate anoints Mashiach and says, this is the King of the Jews.
Right.
They went, just as John had anointed him the Lamb of Elohim because he was of the line of Peretz. Pilate presents him and says, here is your king, King of the Jews. Oh, we've got no king but Caesar. And they still have no king but Caesar. That's why they pray at the Wailing Wall for permission from Rome to build their temple, because they have no king but Caesar. But he presents him, this is your king, King of the Jews. He was in the direct line of the exilarch kings. Joseph Arimathea was a direct exilarch king, a son of David, in the line of Solomon. Right? Yeah, and they renamed our Savior the boot. Yes, they did, Dave Peoples. Yes, they did. They renamed him. And they named him Asu.
Wow.
Yeah. And who was it that named him Asu? The Edomites that were in control of the Roman Church. Okay, so anyway, you see that when Mashiach was then proclaimed, and then Pilate puts it up in 3 languages, right? Jesus, Nazarius, Basilius, Iudeus, INBI, and then in the Latin, Jesu, Netzari, Rex, Iudea. But in the Hebrew, Yahusha HaNetzari Vemelech HaYahudim Yod He Vav He. You need to take that down. You need to put claim to be the Son of God. You need to take that down. What I have written, I have written. And he was truly, he had the bloodline right to be the king. Yeah. And he had, because he was the Ben Adam. And he had the spiritual right to be the king because he was the Ben Elohim. Right? All of these things, this is why you can try to call this fiction if you want. Good luck. If you think you're a great fiction writer, good luck. Try to put all that together. You think you're a great fiction writer. You think you can put that together? You can't. You cannot put all of those facts. You can't. You can't put all of those factors together. Even if you had a body of 200 writers, you couldn't put all that together. But it comes together in the gospel message, you know. And so with Arimathea coming into Britain in 36 AD, that's 12 years before Paul starts preaching. That's 8 years before Mark starts preaching. He's in Britain in 36 AD establishing the faith. And in establishing the faith, as soon as he presented Yahusha HaNetzari Vemelech HaYahudim, the first to believe and accept it were the Magi in the form of the Druids, who went, oh yeah, we knew this. We knew this was coming. We knew all about this. We were just waiting for it to be proclaimed. We knew this. We knew all about this. Yeah, we knew this. And that's why Acts 29, containing this effort, and in no other scripture, tells you that Paul met the Druids and they proved to him what? Let me just read that to you. because when he met, and we've had somebody burn the Sefer because of Acts 29.
Really?
They
Wow.
literally they did a video of them putting the Sefer in a wood stove and burning it
Right.
because of this particular passage, because they believe that the Druids referenced in here were the same Druids that they have in Britain right now, which are a bunch of New Age tree huggers.
Right.
And that's just completely 100% inaccurate. Okay. So in 29:13, it reads this. It says, and it came to pass that certain of the Druids came to Paul privately and showed by their rites and ceremonies that they were descended from the Yahudim
Mm.
that had escaped from bondage in the land of Mitzrayim. And the apostle believed these things, and he gave them the kiss of peace. They had proved, and who had escaped from Mitzrayim? The sons of Zerach, Calcol, Darda, Ethan, Haman. They had all escaped from Mitzrayim. That's a true statement. And Zerach, of course, was a son of Yehuda, the firstborn son of Yehuda. So they're claiming we're Yahudim. And these are our rites and practices. And we had escaped from Mitzrayim before Moshe did the Exodus.
Wow.
And Paul's like, what? But he believed it, you see. And I went into Britain specifically for the purpose of proving that Paul went to Britain. And I found so much literature on the subject. It's ad nauseum. There must be 100 writers that have written and established that Paul went both to Spain and went into Britain. They named all the bishops he anointed in Spain. They name all the bishops he anointed in Britain. They name his trips, how often he came to Britain twice. He preached on Mount Lud. There's a cathedral named after him on Mount Lud in London right now. It's on Lud Hill. It's called St. Paul's Cathedral, right? And the town of Lud, it was named after the Lydian people, the sons of Shem, who had left Troy as built by Dardanus and formed New Troy on the Thames, which was known as Ludonium, which became known as London. The House of Lydians, right? So, anyway, we established, I established it categorically that the chapter Acts 29 is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And particularly this issue right here is absolutely true.
Yeah.
So the question that I have for most people is, Joceph Arimathaea, did he practice the Sabbath? Well, of course he did. Did he observe the feasts? Well, what did he say to Pilate? He must come down off the cross now before the high Sabbath.
Right.
So he was on the calendar. He observed the Sabbath. He observed the feasts. Now, that calendar would not change until 325 AD under the Council of Nicaea.
Right.
So what do you think the church practiced in Britain that was brought there by Joseph Arimathea and his 12 disciples? What do you think their practice was? Shabbat observance, feast observance, calendar observance for 300 years.
Wow.
For 300 years. And that continued. And Rome came in there with the express purpose of extinguishing that. So we know, I was talking with Shane Stokes in Wales. I went to visit him. What a great guy he is. I just love that kid. And of course, the last time I saw him, his wife was pregnant. Now they've got 4 sons. And the kids are great too. His wife is fantastic. His kids are great. His whole family is great. Anyway, so I was talking with Shane, and we went, I wasn't there 30 seconds. Boom, we started launching into this litany of what happened in the first century, right? He's doing all this genealogical research. And so I said, Shane, stop talking. I have to record this. We just have to record this. We put it up live on RFA. I think it's on Radio Free Alaska. But anyway, so we got to talking. And as we talked, there was some very critical issues that took place with Joseph Arimathea. And the whole idea was that he became very well known. He was one of the wealthiest men in the world at that time. And he was running all the tin mining, all the copper mining, all the gold and silver mining. He was in charge of all of that. And so he was extremely wealthy, ex-Ilarch king. He was part of the Roman Senate, member of the Sanhedrin. His name was Nobilis Decuriae in Rome. And they also call him a specific name in the Gospels too. They have this that he points out that he was in the Sanhedrin. So they knew about him, and they beat him 5 times during the time that James the Just, or Yaakov Tzaddik was his real name, the brother of Mashiach, was governing the church of Qumran. Yaakov Tzaddik Joceph Arimathaea left, and he left with Miriam, and her sister, and 12 disciples, and they came into Britain, and where he was going all the time. He'd been there with Mashiach for many, many years, and he came back to reestablish himself, and he was given 12 hides of land. Well, the church under Tiberius, Rome under Tiberius, by the way, the first pope was Augustus Caesar, in case you're wondering. It wasn't Peter. It was Augustus Caesar. They turned around and said, okay, well, look, we want that guy dead, Tiberius. We want you to go. So he commissioned a group of Romans to go into Britain and to kill all the Druids, but most particularly to kill JOA, kill Joseph Arimathea. He was the number one target of that edict in 51 AD.
Wow.
And so they came in and they found a group of Druids, which was the last camp of Druids at a place called Bangor. And Bangor means a round circle, and the Druids used to practice in a round circle. Anyway, they're on the coast there at Menai, the Straits of Menai, at Bangor. And here comes these Roman troops, and they said, hey, can we hang out with you? We don't have any food or anything else. And so the Druids said, oh, yeah, sure, we'll accommodate you. We'll feed your horses. We'll feed you guys. And, tomorrow morning, we'll get up and have breakfast. Well, in the middle of the night, the Romans slaughtered every man, woman, and child.
Wow.
This happened in 56 AD. And so there's a very famous legend of Boadicea, the queen at that time. And Boadicea was like, oh, yeah? Kill every Roman. And so between 56 AD and 61 AD, they killed 70,000 Romans in the British Isles and chased them completely out. You're not coming here, right? So the faith continued to flourish, Sabbath keeping, feast keeping, calendar respecting. And that calendar would become known. There was a fragment found of that calendar called the Coligny calendar that they found in France. Rome had destroyed all evidence of the calendar otherwise. As much as they could, they destroyed the evidence of the calendar. But the Coligny calendar was found in France, which was almost completely intact. They were able to put it back together and read the calendar. So anyway, Augustine finally makes landhead at 590 AD under Pope Gregory. And here comes Augustine, and Augustine lands at the far side of the British Isles in Canterbury. And he builds a fortress. It's called the Abbey of Augustine. And it's in Canterbury. The Canterbury Cathedral is right next to it. And in this abbey, he proceeds to work politically until he could excommunicate all of the bishops that were out in Wales, all the Sabbath keepers. And then because they would not venerate the saints, they would not venerate Miriam, and they did not agree with the transubstantiation. So he excommunicated him and then ultimately had him executed.
Wow.
And Rome began its incursion into Britain following Augustine. And so by the time you get to, I forget what his name was, Oglethorpe or Anglethorpe, whatever his name was. Anyway, he was the first king to convert to Romanism in the 700s. But the kings were all of the faith before that in lockstep order. And so then the Civil War began between the true faith, which was being protected by Robert the Bruce, and the Roman faith, which had completely overtaken England. And so then to instill it, William the Conqueror came in, French Catholic, in 1066, and conquered the place wholesale. And his son, Edward I, completely subjugated Wales, put up all these big castles where Henry Gruver would have his vision. Was one of those castles.
Wow.
And anyway, so this was a complete subjugation of the Welsh to make sure that they put out the fire that had been lit by Joseph Arimathea. And I think there was a point where there wasn't a single person of the true faith living alive on earth. Rome had succeeded in putting out that light. But guess what? It's like that light that they describe in the Maccabees. They pulled it out of the cave and it immediately lit.
Yeah.
The light did not go out. The light has not gone out. And so at any rate, we can see that by the time you get to Henry VIII is like, okay, I'm going to push Rome out of here. But even though he pushed them out politically, he didn't push them out spiritually. And Rome still controls the Anglican Church. It's Rome, except there's no Pope.
Right.
They did not reform the faith. But the Reformation is on the way now, because the Reformation is found with the rebirth of Scripture and the Sefer and the delivery of the true name. The delivery of the true name. And by the way, I just want to say this. This is not my work. I'm not taking credit for this. This is the work of the Ruach. So, don't sit here and think that I'm standing here aggrandizing myself. I'm just telling you that the releasing, we're not the only ones that have released the true name. There have been others who've released the true name and have published it, and they know. And the tenets of the faith are now springing back to life, and it has nothing to do with Judaism. We're not, fake Jew wannabes.
Nope.
That's not what the situation is at all. We are restoring ourselves to the ancient path, the path that was rebirthed and finalized in the life of Mashiach, which was given its birth by Joceph Arimathaea in Britain. And by the way, one last thing I have to tell you. The last trip, I was in Britain for Pesach and Matzah. And in the last part of the feast, we went up to Anglesey, right across from Bangor, where this whole slaughter had taken place on the island of Menai. And there was a rumor that the bones of Miriam had been repatriated to Britain on Anglesey. And there was a particular church. And so we made a special trip. We went up to this church, and we're walking through the graveyard. The church is long since abandoned, and it's just closed down facility with an old graveyard. And we're walking through this thing. We're like, okay, well, this isn't going very well. Where's the grave of Mary? And how are we going to find out? Well, it was kind of hopeless. So we come out of there and we're like, okay, well, we might as well forget this. We're not going to find the grave of Mary. I said, well, let's go get some coffee. So we did a search, coffee near me, Oh, there's a coffee shop up here, the old train station. So we go up, and the old train station is off the beaten path. If you don't know it's there, you're not going to find it, right?
Right.
We go up there, and we went up to the train station. We go in, we're having coffee. And then as we come out, here's a billboard right across from the front door of this train station saying, if you're looking for the grave of Mary, you need to go to this museum at such and such a town and blah, blah, blah. Talk to the curator, right? And it's right on this billboard that we would have never seen, right? And so we go down to this museum, and we get down to the museum, and I said, we're looking for the grave of Mary. And one guy says, oh, are you? He said, well, I got something to show you. I said, okay, well, let's see it. So we followed him up. We go up this staircase, up to this locked room. He opens up the room. We go into this room full of filing cabinets, big shelves of stuff, We get to the back of the room, and on the bottom shelf, he pulls out this box and pulls off this white paper. And here's this tombstone. And it's on red granite and badly worn from rain and so on. And it's about 18 inches high and about 12 inches wide. And it's got an M like this on it.
Wow.
With a fish on the back leg of this leg.
Wow.
And I said, okay, so what do you know about this tombstone? Where'd you find it? He said, well, this guy, this researcher, had heard rumor about, maybe Mary's bones were in Anglesey. And he went to the Vatican, and he found the document in the Vatican. And what had happened in the 7th century, and I don't know how it happened, but some negotiation had taken place that the Vatican, which had the bones of Peter, Paul, and Mary, who were singing Puff the Magic Dragon at the time.
Right.
But Peter and Paul were repatriated. Their bones were repatriated to the Abbey of Augustine at Canterbury. And Miriam's bones were repatriated to where the 12 hides of land were given to Joseph Arimathaea on Anglesey. So Anglesey is the true Avalon.
Wow.
And so anyway, so he finds this, and it's giving specific details that what had happened was the bones were placed at that church that I was talking about, the dead church. But when William the Conqueror invaded, they were fearful that these Norman troops were going to come into Anglesey and do what the Roman troops had done to the Druids and kill everybody and destroy the tomb. Huh. So they picked up the bones and they moved the bones to this artesian well. And they buried her next to this artesian well with this headstone. And this artesian well is very interesting, because artesian well springs up from the ground naturally, right? Yeah. That well becomes a little bit of a stream, then becomes a creek, then becomes a river, and eventually is dammed off and creates all the fresh water for the island of Anglesey in this reservoir. Wow. And it comes right out of where the grave of Miriam was. Well, he goes over looking, and he's searching back and forth. Anyway, he comes back to the museum and he reports to them, oh yeah, I found the grave. It's up by that artesian well, and I found a headstone that you might be interested in. So I'm talking to Ian Jones the next day, and Ian Jones, Dr. Jones, telling me this whole thing. And he said, so we sent a curator over there the following day who was going back and forth to that artesian well, up and down the creek, both sides, looking in the bushes, looking in the weeds, looking at everything. And he says, it got to dusk and the sun was about to go down, and they found the tombstone lying next to the road.
Wow.
And so it looks like Graham was planning on removing it and taking it for himself. And at the last second, he decided not to. And so he left it there. So this tombstone is still in the filing cabinet in this museum. They don't have it out. It's still in the
Wow.
filing cabinet in the museum. But this appears to be the tomb of Miriam.
Mary.
So when you talk about the true Yahudim, one species of the true Yahudim, the House of Zerach, is littered all through the British Isles
Wow.
and in Spain and in Portugal and in Western France. I believe that, for instance, the Huguenots, I don't know if you're familiar with Huguenots, but the Huguenots
Right.
became a Protestant sect, and they were persecuted by the French. The French killed 30,000 of them, for instance, right after the death of John Calvin. These Huguenots fled. Okay. I went to South Africa, right? But I believe they were actually at the House of Zerach. And of course, when we were in Cornwall, we saw all this evidence of stones, right? And there was a pathway of pilgrimage that came all the way up from the Basques, from Portugal through the Basques, and all the way up the western coast of France that are marked with stones. Go this way, and then they would cross the passage and make pilgrimage over Cornwall on their way to Wales and on their way up to Anglesey. So anyway, all of these things are kind of very, very, I think they're important in terms of establishing who the true Yahudim are.
I think so too.
Now, if you look, I'm just going to leave it at this, Chelle, and then I'm going to end my remarks. If you look at this agenda that's on the table right now, which is to kill all the white people, okay? No one can talk about this. You can't say this publicly. But there is an agenda out there to kill all the white people, and to do it in a whole bunch of ways. One is, of course, to promote deviant sexuality that results in no offspring, to kill off the progeneration. Another is to cause the DNA to be watered down, but watering down the DNA with other races. And the last is to kill. And so and they're not shy about telling you this, that they want to kill all the white people. They're not shy about it. Some are much more vocal than others, but less you hear this idea, we're going to kill all these white people. We're going to get rid of all these white people. What is it about the white people they don't like? They want to be rid of the House of Yasharel. Who's leading this movement? It is the House of Esau. Because Esau continues to be at war with Yaakov.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say this. Esau never prevailed over Yaakov.
No.
Not in all of history has Esau prevailed over Yaakov. And Esau will not prevail over Yaakov now either.
That's right.